the more people you know, the better life you will have.
Why?
So here's the thing.
I really like the idea that besides networking, you also bring the idea of kindness, of just being nice.
In the Mika Show, we highlight practical methods to create a meaningful impact in our personal and professional life. Thanks for joining us today, and let the show begin.
Hello everyone, bonjour les amis, xin chào tất cả các bạn. Hello Mats.
Hello, Mika.
Also good to see you today.
Likewise. Pleasure to be here.
Always nice to meet you, always nice to talk to you. And there's so many topics we can talk with you forever. Forever, guys. But today, we will be talking about a very important skill to master, networking.
Yep. One of my favorites and one of the easiest ways to set yourself apart.
Nice. But before we dig in the topic, I want to highlight something very special about you. Mats, you have like 5 companies.
Yep.
You are doing management coaching, outsourcing, events planning, a lot of things I cannot even remember. And you're doing this without a college degree, without a high school degree.
Yep.
How is it possible?
It's simple. It's doing things.
No, come on. You cannot just let us with this.
No, but in the end of the day, like most of the time when people do things, when people have a drive to do things, you can do whatever you want, right? So as kids, we're always told we can do whatever we want. But a lot of the time, the parents don't even believe it, right? Like a lot of the time you're told, whatever you want to do in life, you can do it. And reality is we are capable as human beings. Generally, the only things that hold us back is us, right? Like there's nothing else holding us back. So it's only our own beliefs, our own thought in ourselves, our belief in ourselves, our ability to believe we can actually achieve things, right? So most of the time, the challenge you often see with education, and it's not always, but a lot of the time with education, it puts it into boxes. We think about things a certain way, right? So a very typical field is like accounting. So most people who are working in accounting have an accountant degree.
Don't even talk about this. I'm so afraid of accounting.
I know, it's scary stuff. But the whole thing is everyone think about things the exact same way. So when you talk to 10 accountant services, they're all doing things exactly the same way because that's how they've been taught to do it. Again, if you want to innovate, if you want to think differently, the easiest way to do it is looking at what are the problems people have, what are the things that would be great to do differently, and instead of just following the course, following the norms, actually doing things in a way that makes sense to you. So.
And I know also you focus a lot on developing your soft skills. I know that you have been reading for 10 years, 1 book per week.
Yep. And that's, fundamentally reading for me was one of the best ways, particularly when I was younger, to learn, right? Because, there's a lot of podcasts, there's a lot of shows out there that are good to learn from. But the thing is, most great books have been looked to many, many times. They've been reiterated, they've been updated. And the thing is, you get a significant amount of knowledge compressed in a very good way. So I would say most of particularly my initial success definitely came from reading books that made sense and were good at explaining what they were doing.
So speaking about books that are explaining things, today we want to dig in the topic of networking, which is such an important skill to have when it comes to professional and personal life. Can you tell us a little bit more, like what is networking and what's the right mindset to have?
Yeah, for sure. So the fundamental of networking is really just connecting with other humans, all right? So one of the things is a little bit like education, actually. A lot of people think, I'll take this education and then I never need to learn again. But even when you take an education and then go into a field, whatever it is, you still need to stay up to date. If you want to be successful, it's always about staying up to date. Networking is the same. You want to continuously grow and develop your networking skill, your communication skills, because the ability to communicate with other people, the ability to connect with other people is generally what's going to set you apart. When you look at most people who are unemployed, most people who are generally struggling in life, a lot of the time the reason is because they're not surrounded by people. They don't know how to communicate effectively with people around them. And they're not sure how to actually get themselves out in the world. And I always say, even with no education, I can dump me into any city in the world with nothing and I'll figure out a way, right? Because reality is that most people, when they're applying for jobs, it's very simple. and say, hey, how do I get this job? Well, I'll send a million resumes to a million companies, and hopefully one of them will interview me. And the thing is, they do nothing different. They do nothing to stand out. But the things you can do to just make a little difference is, I mean, it takes no time, but no one does it, right? So one of my favorite techniques, if you ever get called into an interview, or even to write a front page for a cover letter, right? If you just reach out to a couple of people that actually work in the company. So let's say I want to work we're in Vietnam, so let's say Viettel is my dream to work in. I get an interview and I literally just connect to a few people. So, nowadays you can use LinkedIn, Facebook, whatever. Connect to a few people that work there and say, hey, I'm considering getting a job here at Viettel. What are the things you really love about the company and what are things you think is less cool? Now, if you walk into an interview and you can say, well, I spoke with Mika down in accounting and I spoke with Jack over in whatever, if you can actually display that in the interview and say you've done that, one, it shows you actually know the company a little bit and you actually know what you're walking into. And two, it shows you're taking initiative. Like such a simple thing, you can literally do it in 15 minutes. Yeah. But such a simple thing can set you hugely apart from any other candidate, right? And it's not, again, it doesn't take a lot of skill, but it's just about looking at what are small things I can do that make me stand out.
But how would you approach somebody like this? How would you start the e-networking? With which kind of email?
I would literally just, message someone. I've done it a few times on LinkedIn in similar situation and just say, hey, I can see you're working in this department. Would it be okay to ask you a couple of questions because I'm considering working in the same company?
Straightforward.
It's straightforward. Don't lie to, just be honest and say what you're looking for. And sometimes, people are like, I hate the company. This is horrible. This is horrible. This is horrible. Sometimes people are like, yeah, it's great here. These things are great. These things are not so great. And if you can walk in and say, I want to work for this company because, I've talked with a couple of people and they all say that the way you help grow and develop your staff is amazing. And that's why I want to work here. Like if you actually have a reason for, I don't just want to work here to get a paycheck, right? But if you actually have some solid reasoning based on evidence, if you will, again, you set yourself apart.
So again, it's about connecting, being transparent, and having a reason to contact this person.
Yep.
And what are the common mistakes that we can make either with e-networking or just like face-to-face networking?
A lot of the time, I think that the biggest challenge I see is people are always looking at what's in it for me. So a lot of people walk into any relationship or any potential relationship with someone they meet, and they're like, what can I get from this person? What can I benefit from talking about? Why would I spend the time? Number one is a big flaw because most of the time, you get the most value out of relationships that are not built on give me stuff, I give you stuff, you give me stuff, but it's built on genuine, actual relationship, caring about other people. And in most cases, what happens is that when you start networking, when you start building relationships, you very quickly see the power of it, right? And people often think, well, okay, Mika, she can't help me. She's not in my field of accounting, so why should I talk to her? But reality is, one, you know a lot of people. You probably have an uncle. You probably have, friends, whatever.
My uncle is an alcoholic in Siberia. I'm not sure he can help you guys, but...
What not to do in life? No.
Yeah, what not? Still can help. Oh my God, okay.
You can learn something from everyone. So, but the fundamental in networking is looking at what are the things that, what can benefit. And fundamentally for me, the way I look at it, both from a business and a personal perspective, is very simple. The more people you know, the better a life you will have.
Why?
So here's the thing. A lot of people get afraid of other humans. They're like, oh, one time I met this person, they let me down. One time I met this person, they scammed me. So I look at it in a very simplistic manner. If I meet 10 people, 2 of them will probably screw me over. 1 of them will probably be an asshole, and a couple of them will probably be whatever. But 4 or 5 of them will probably be good people. 1 or 2 might become really great friends. Now, most people say, oh, there's a risk of me getting hurt here, so I will not do it. I look at it the other way around and say, if I can add more great people to my life will be better. Does that make sense? So the whole thing is, like, again, I've traveled all over the world. I've lived in many, many countries. And fundamentally for me, anywhere I go, I know great humans, right? Because anywhere I go, I connect with people. I network a lot. I go to a lot of conferences. I generally meet a lot of people online and so on, right? So I spend a lot of time connecting with people and networking, but it means one, wherever in the world I go, I know great people. Two, whatever I'm doing in business, and I mean, I have multiple businesses, so whatever I'm doing, if I ever need help with things, I know people who can help, right? If there's ever anything I need, there's always people who are willing and happy to help me because I have great relationships with them.
And speaking of personal and professional networking, what are the differences and why we should always try to do networking for both personal and professional?
Again, honestly, I try and not differentiate too much because a lot of the time you will meet people in a business settings that might become a great friend because if they're great people, they might be people you want to have in your life. So fundamentally, I try and not differentiate too much. But the fundamental for me is when I meet people is I'm always looking at, does our values align? Do I actually feel comfortable? Do I enjoy hanging out with this human being? And is it giving me energy, right? Am I enjoying the conversations? Am I enjoying the company of this individual? And so on.
So you still focus on something to get out of the relationship, but it's not money or pure interest, something more on an energy level. Am I right?
It's more a question of like, everyone meets people and you're like, yeah, that's a weirdo, right?
You know.
I'm sure people say that about me.
You know.
But the thing is, people always meet people and you just don't connect, and that's natural, right? Like the goal is not to connect with every human you meet. The goal is to meet a bunch of people and then figure out which are the people that you want to be surrounded by, right? And you have this good old saying that, you know, a person is basically the average of the 5 people they spend the most time with. So fundamentally in life, what I've learned is that most people see themselves as a reflection of who they are around. Now, a good example with this, and most people can connect to this, if you go home and visit your parents, you feel like you're 12 or 15 again, even when you're 60 years old. Like I spoke very old people and I say, okay, if you go and visit your parents, how old do you feel? And they're like 15, right? And that's how we feel. The thing is, when you have friends, when you're growing up, the friends you have there, they meet you as a certain person. You might be the funny Mika, or you might be the driven Mika, or you might be the sporty Mika, or whatever. Every time you meet those people, your self-reflection of yourself keeps being that, right? So even if you grow a lot as a person, you're still, when you're around the same people, you often see yourself as the same person you used to be. One of the things that are really helpful, and I've discovered this by traveling a lot, is that when you actually move somewhere else, when you like literally replace your friendship circle, what happens is whatever growth you've done suddenly become realized. And you see yourself much more as who you are at that point in time. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So fundamentally, now you can do this living in one place, but replacing your friends is very, very difficult, right? And it doesn't, like, again, don't replace people for the sake of replacing them. But it's important to understand that you as a human, your potential as a human, and the world around you seeing you the way you are is very depending on your self-reflection, right? People might see your growth. People might see you very differently, but you always reflect into people the time you first met them.
And that's why we need to do networking in order to see other reflections of us connect. We're always being stimulated, basically.
Yeah.
That's the purpose.
And fundamentally, it helps you grow from that alone. So literally just meeting other people, presenting yourself, saying, this is who I am, this is what I do, having great conversations, it makes people look at you in a certain way. And every time you get that, it's like you're basically updating yourself on a regular basis when you meet people.
I like this idea a lot because honestly, for me, before doing the show, I was thinking of networking as something like a skill you need to know, you need to have when you go to events about work. When you go to like wine fairs, fashion industry, it's like, okay, I'm in a networking mood. I need to connect with this and this and this. Whereas when talking to you, I realized, I hope you guys also realize that networking is really connecting, but on a more genuine level, on a more natural, authentic level.
And I always say, I mean, the easiest way to network with other people is being a kind human.
Yeah.
Because reality is that there's always people out there. Everyone struggles all the time. Like all people have some struggles they're going through at any point in time. So sometimes even just listening to people a little bit or I love helping people. The simplest way to help people is connect them to people who can solve or help them solve whatever challenges they're going through. And that's not always business. Honestly, working as a management coach, particularly when I work with entrepreneurs or people in bigger companies, if they used to be doing great and suddenly stop doing great, the reasoning is usually life at home or around friends. Because a lot of the time, if you're focused, if you're doing, let's say work, you're working really hard, you're getting great results. If stuff happens at home, for most people, that influence into their work performance and their work life, right? And literally, I felt like I became a couple therapist at some point when I was working with corporate managers, because every time someone called me, I would say, I had this guy, he used to be great, he's not great anymore, can you fix him? And every single time it was problems with a wife, problem with a parent, problem with something at home, right? So yes, in principle, his management skills were great in every case, but it's a question of there's other things that takes up their brain power and takes away their focus.
But coming back to the networking process, do you have a technique maybe like before, during, and after networking? I'm talking about events.
Yeah.
If you wanna be excellent at events, at communication with people.
Yeah. So first thing I would say, a lot of people are uncomfortable when they're alone at events, right?
When they're alone by themselves.
When they're by themselves, and that's fair. So there's a couple of techniques. So one of them, and the first one is probably a development area more than anything. So learning public speaking is extremely valuable, because some of the things, when you're meeting people for the first time, the way you communicate makes a huge difference. And if you learn to speak in public, that enables you to grow your communication skills in general, right? It helps you utilizing body language better and so on, right? So public speaking is definitely a great skill to learn if you want to be better at connecting with people. Now, generally, I have a few things that I typically use myself, right? So when I go into an event, there's always lines, right? There's always queues somewhere. So you're checking in, you're standing at a buffet line or something, and you're standing there. And you're like, ooh, I'm all alone. There's people in front of me, behind me. Just strike a cowboy conversation, right? Ask some simple questions and get people talking.
For example,
why are you here? What made you go to this event? What made you show up today? If it's in the middle or later on, what's the most valuable thing you have learned yet? What have you enjoyed the most? So just simple questions, right? Most people start, and this is okay as well, but most people start like, oh, the weather's great today, huh? And those kind of things. But that doesn't really make...
Small talk.
It doesn't make other people talk. If you actually ask them their opinion about something that is related, right? Like if you are at an event together, those kind of simple questions are like, what do you like? What do you think about it? Even if they're like, oh, I hate this thing, right? Well, then you understand how they feel. So, but getting people to talk by asking them small, simple questions is number one. The second thing I love doing is at events, there's always very awkward people standing around by themselves.
Okay.
And here's the thing. They're often standing in a corner looking around and they're like, oh, well, no one's talking to me. They want to talk because they're there, but they're very awkward.
Men or women?
Both.
Okay.
Now, here's the thing. If you walk up and talk to them, one, you save their life or you save their day. Two, you might actually meet a great human. And three, they will remember you forever. So when you do that, a simple thing, bring them in. A lot of the time people are like, oh yeah, I'm waiting for a friend or I'm just whatever. Just bring them in, right? So whenever you can connect to new people, whenever you can see people that are out of place, first of all, they love to talk to you. Like no one likes standing all by themselves, pretending they're like waiting for someone or looking at their phone and it's like...
Me, I don't like either. And it happens sometimes.
It happens, right? So the thing is when someone comes up and talks to you, you're like, yeah, talk to me, please, right? And again, just be a kind human being. Talk to them, figure out what they're doing, why they're there, and so on. And generally, it's a great way to connect with people.
I really like the idea that besides networking, you also bring the idea of kindness, of just being nice. Do something nice when you are with a group of people, and if there is like a lonely soul, to notice them, go talk to them and connect people together, despite the way maybe they may look, like you said, maybe look weird. I really like the idea of like moving forward, take the risk, Take the risk to go to see somebody that may be really weird, but still you take it, and I think it's very beautiful.
Again, it's doing what no one else does, right? So again, you can do very small things most other people don't do, and you doing it makes a huge difference for another person. And the thing about networking, people think it's like, oh, well, if I network with someone, they have to buy my stuff, or I have to buy their stuff, and that's not at all. Networking, connecting with humans is, can you help them in some way? Okay. I love talking about humans and behavior and stuff like that, which can be very helpful. So when you're having a 5, 10, 15 minutes conversation with someone, right, you can often change a person's life. And fundamentally, what you're doing is when you're networking, what you're trying to do is simply help people. The simplest thing you can do, if you help another human being, they want to help you back, right? Again, you're not doing it for them to help you back, but you're simply putting out good things in the world, and eventually somehow it comes back to you, right? So I speak at a lot of conferences and so on, and the one thing you would see is when I walk into any room, very few people say bad things about me. Now, that's not necessarily, the goal is not to make everyone like you, but the thing is, if you put out a lot of positive vibrations to the world, it tend to come back, right? If people talk to you, if people say, oh, I met Mika, great, she was awesome, whatever. If you have positive vibrations around the world, then, stuff comes back to you. People are like, okay, I need to work with someone, maybe this Mika is the perfect one, right? So even if they haven't met you, even if they've never spoke to you, just hearing about you in a positive light from multiple people around them is very likely to make them want to connect with you, make them want to potentially buy whatever you're selling or help you out with whatever you're struggling with.
But how do we reach that level when other people talk nicely about us?
For me, it's simple. I mean, I literally just meet people, be nice, and be as helpful as you can be. Because fundamentally, you have a good old saying that says that if you want to be successful, help a lot of people. The more people you help, the better life you will have. Right.
And so how networking can improve our life, according to you?
So fundamentally everything, right? I mean, you can definitely work-wise, job-wise, even if you don't run a business, even if you have a job, finding a new job, the best way to do it is go out and find people who actually have jobs, right? If I live in Saigon and I had to find a job, I would actually go and research what are the 2, 3, 4, 5 companies that I would really like to work for him. And again, let's say Viettel was the company. I would literally go and say, okay, I want to work in, for example, marketing in Viettel. I would literally go and look up who are the marketing managers. I would probably start socially stalking them. And every time they're like, oh, I'm going to this event or we have this thing happening, I'll be there. Because here's the thing, if I meet one of those people who are potentially hiring, then just having the conversation with them makes them so much more likely to hire me in the future. Even if I wouldn't even walk in saying I'm looking for a job, I would just get to know them, connect with them, and make sure they know who I am. Right? One of the big things that a lot of people struggle with a little bit is they're constantly looking for output, right? And just connecting to people. It's so often when you hear people hiring, they're like, oh yeah, he was hired because it was the cousin or it was a friend. Here's the thing, when anyone is hiring people, the fundamental is avoid failure. If you hire someone you have a good idea what you get. The likelihood is that if a hiring manager knows you're not crazy, knows you're a pretty cool human being, they're so much more likely to actually hire you, right? So just connecting with people, meeting them prior to a potential interview makes a game changer. And again, if they have a pile of 500 resumes of people who have applied for a job, if they know you, they are, again, 90% more likely to pick your name out of that pile and send you to an interview, right?
I really like the idea that you make networking seem so easy, natural, and almost like a question of life, because that's how we have an impact on our life, on the life of other people. It makes me want to go networking right now, actually.
Even when you just look at people, if you look at depression, it's a huge thing. Yeah. A lot of people sitting around being depressed, often because they don't have a lot of friends, they don't really have someone that can listen to them, or, they're in a difficult situation one way or another. Whereas again, if you network, if you know people, it changes your life. right? Like the more great people you have in your life, no matter how introvert you are, no matter how, and I'm a mega introvert, by the way, by nature. Like it took me a very long time to learn communicating with people, to learn networking. But this was, again, it came out of some of all these books I read where I was like, if you want to be successful, you need to do this thing. And I spent many years learning how to walk up to a stranger and say hello, right? It's absolutely not easy for me. I've learned to become less uncomfortable with it, but it still takes effort for me, right? But the point is, I know the impact it had on my life, and therefore I'm willing to do it.
I think it's a beautiful risk to take that we should all do, actually. And you were mentioning about the life, about the quality of life. And I wanted to ask you one last question.
Yes.
Unfortunately, we come to the end. Time is flying when we have fun. I wanted to ask you, Mads, what can we do to improve the quality of our life?
I think fundamentally for me, the single most important thing we can do is get to know ourselves better. I think a lot of people who are struggling in life, a lot of people who don't know what they're doing, what they want to do, I think a lot of it is if you get to know yourself better, if you get to understand yourself better, you can really, really improve the quality of your life fundamentally, right? So yeah, I definitely recommend spending time, not just alone, but spending time researching and figuring out who are you, even thinking, right? Like nowadays, we're always busy on a phone. We always have, like most people say, oh, I get great ideas when I shower. I'm like, yep, that's because the only time when you're not staring at some kind of device is when you're in the shower. Now, some people even have devices in the shower nowadays, but that's why you get great ideas. So if you spend more time, like one of my things is I love walking by nature. And even in Saigon, where it's not always the best walking sort of territory, but just walking and not actually having music in your head or reading things and so on can make a huge difference, right? Because just that ability to think and breathe can make a big difference for you.
It does. Thank you so much, Mads, for your advice, technique, methods, your insight. It is so precious. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I will be very curious to know what are your thoughts about networking. How do you cope with this technique, advice? Please let us know in the comment section. And don't forget to share, like, comment. You know already the thing. Okay, enough. Bye-bye. Go. Off you go. Do networking. Thank you, Mads.
Thank you.